On my birthday, my affluent grandpa chuckled. How did you spend your $3,400,000 trust fund? I dazedly blinked. What trust fund? My parents looked like they were about to throw up. He turned to them and asked, where did it go? Okay, take a deep breath. Imagine your world shattering in an instant, not with a bang, but with a question. On my 25th birthday, my wealthy grandpa looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and asked, so, how are you planning to spend your $3.4 million trust fund? I blinked, utterly bewildered, because I had no idea what he was talking about, and that's when I saw my parents' faces turn absolutely white. You know that moment? The one where you realize everything you thought was real was a lie? I remember standing there, a cold champagne flute in my hand, in our dining room that was still decked out with childish birthday decorations for my 25th birthday. Grandpa Edmund, my dad's father, had flown all the way in from Connecticut just for me. His sleek silver Mercedes was still cooling off in the driveway outside. Mom had spent days, literally days, cooking all his favorite dishes, and Dad even took the afternoon off from his accounting firm. A rare treat. I smiled, looking around at the small family gathering. My younger brother, Tyler, already going for his third slice of cake, and Aunt Patricia droning on about her book club to anyone who'd listen. Everything felt normal. Everything felt safe. Then Grandpa Edmund cleared his throat. You know, that kind of commanding silence only an 82-year-old patriarch worth millions can instantly achieve. His steel gray eyes, usually so warm, now held a strange twinkle I couldn't quite place. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Madison, my dear, he began, before we get too far into the festivities, I wanted to discuss something important with you. He smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes crinkling. Now that you're 25, I'm curious. How do you plan to spend your $3.4 million trust fund? The entire room went dead silent. You could literally hear a fork clatter against a plate. My face went from burning hot to freezing cold in an instant, like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. I'm sorry, I managed to whisper. What? Your trust fund, sweetheart, he repeated, pulling out his reading glasses and studying some papers. The one I established the day you were born. It became fully accessible to you today, on your 25th birthday. He even quoted the numbers. Principal amount was $2 million, but with compound interest over 25 years, it's sitting at approximately $7.2 million. My mouth just hung open. No sound came out. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to quickly put my champagne glass down before I dropped it. Grandpa, I finally stammered, I have no idea what you're talking about. Nobody ever told me about a trust fund. That's when the color drained completely from his face. His gaze, sharp as a knife, snapped to my parents, who were sitting absolutely frozen at the other end of the table. Mom's face was sheet white, like she'd seen a ghost. Dad looked like he was about to vomit directly into the floral centerpiece. What do you mean? Grandpa Edmund's voice dropped, becoming this low, dangerous growl I had never heard before. Richard, Caroline, what is she talking about? Dad's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Mom, on the other hand, just grabbed her wine glass and drained it in one gulp, her hand trembling so violently that the glass actually rattled against her teeth. We can explain. Dad finally choked out, his voice cracking horribly. Then explain, Grandpa Edmund commanded, slowly rising from his chair, which scraped harshly against the hardwood floor. Where did the money go? The next hour was pure torture. My brother, Tyler, quietly made his excuses and vanished upstairs. Aunt Patricia mumbled something about calling later and practically ran out the door. The untouched birthday cake just sat there, in the middle of the table, like some grotesque, silent witness as my entire life. Everything I thought I knew simply unraveled before my very eyes. The truth, the horrifying, gut-wrenching truth, spilled out. My parents had stolen my trust fund. All of it. For 10 years, they'd systematically drained the account through a series of fraudulent transfers and forged documents. See, the trust was explicitly structured so that absolutely no one, Not even guardians could touch it until I turned 25. That's why they had to commit outright fraud. Dad, being a CPA, used his connections to create fake documentation, making it look like I was authorizing these withdrawals. And Mom? She'd practiced my signature for months, perfecting it until she could replicate it flawlessly, even fooling notaries. It was sickening. That beautiful beach house in Malibu? My money. Dad's fancy Tesla? My money. The $90,000 kitchen renovation? Mine. Even Tyler's full-ride scholarship to private school? It was a lie. That scholarship they always bragged about didn't exist. They paid his tuition with my stolen funds. How could you? I whispered, staring at these two people who were suddenly strangers to me, these people who had raised me. I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college. I've been living in a tiny studio apartment with black mold in the bathroom because I couldn't afford anything better. I've been eating ramen and canned soup for years. Mom's face finally crumpled. Madison, honey, we were going to pay it back, she stammered. We just needed to borrow it temporarily. Your father's business had some setbacks, and we borrowed it. Grandpa Edmund's voice, however, was like a blade, sharp enough to cut glass. You committed fraud against your own daughter. We gave her everything. Dad suddenly roared, defensively. We raised her, fed her, clothed her. We sacrificed for her. This was just compensation. The sheer, unbelievable audacity of that statement hit me like a physical blow. I stood up so fast my chair actually toppled backward with a crash. Compensation. I spat. For doing the bare minimum required by law, so you wouldn't be charged with child neglect? Don't be dramatic. Mom snapped back, her tears miraculously drying up in an instant. You had a roof over your head, food on the table. Do you know how expensive it is to raise a child? Apparently less than $3.4 million. I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. Is that what I'm worth to you? A beach house in Malibu and a car that costs more than my annual salary? Grandpa Edmund was already on his phone, his fingers moving with surprising speed for an 82-year-old. I'm calling my attorney, he stated, and the police. Richard, Caroline, I suggest you find yourselves a very good lawyer. Dad, please, my father pleaded, his voice breaking. We're family. We can work this out privately. Think of your grandson. Think of what this will do to the family reputation. I am thinking of my family, Grandpa Edmund retorted, his voice chillingly cold. Specifically, the granddaughter, who's been scraping by on minimum wage while you drove a $100,000 car funded by stolen money. The birthday party completely dissolved into chaos. My parents threw every manipulation tactic they had at us, crying, pleading, threatening, eventually screaming. Dad claimed Grandpa had always favored me over Tyler. Mom accused me of being ungrateful and selfish. They painted themselves as these poor victims of circumstance, just trying to provide a good life for their family. It was disgusting. I walked out of my childhood home that night. I never went back. The legal battle that followed dragged on for 18 grueling months. Grandpa Edmund didn't hold back. He hired a dream team of lawyers specializing in financial fraud. And what they uncovered? It was worse than anything we could have imagined. They found out my parents had been planning this since before I was born. They knew about the trust fund before Grandpa had even finished signing the paperwork. They'd spent 25 years just waiting for their opportunity. And when I turned 15, that's when they started the fraud in earnest. They recovered text messages from my mother's phone, casual conversations with my father about Madison's money and how they'd spend it, email chains detailing exactly which signatures needed to be forged, bank statements showing regular, systematic transfers from my trust directly into their personal accounts. It all started when I was 15. That first year, they successfully forged documents, claiming I was authorizing educational expenses. But the most gut-wrenching discovery? A video on my dad's laptop, filmed when I was just 12. I was away at summer camp, the cheapest option I'd chosen because I felt guilty about the cost. And there they were, in our living room, with a bottle of champagne, celebrating a $200,000 transfer. Mom was laughing, mocking me for choosing the cheap camp. They toasted, get this, to my generous contribution to their retirement fund. It makes my stomach turn just thinking about it. About 6 months into the legal proceedings, my younger brother, Tyler, finally reached out. We met at a coffee shop, exactly halfway between his dorm and my new apartment, a much nicer place now, thanks to Grandpa Edmund helping me out financially until all this resolved. I didn't know, he said immediately, his eyes red-rimmed and full of shame. Madison, I swear, I had no idea. They told me my scholarship was real. He looked so broken. They also told me you just didn't want to go to a 4-year university, I said, stirring my coffee, the words bitter in my mouth. They told everyone I wasn't college material. Do you remember that? How they'd laugh when people asked where I was going to school. How they'd say I was better suited for hands-on work than academics. Tyler's face completely crumpled. They paid for everything for me, he choked out. Spring break trips, a new car for my 16th birthday, all my spending money. God, Madison, I'm so sorry. I honestly thought they were just successful. I thought Dad's business was doing well. His business was doing terribly. I corrected him bluntly. He'd been operating at a loss for 6 years. Everything was funded by stealing from me. I'll testify, Tyler declared suddenly, a new resolve in his eyes. Whatever you need. I'll tell the court everything I know about their spending, the timeline, all of it. This is sick. You're my sister. The trial itself lasted 3 intense weeks. Local news picked up the story, with headlines like, Wealthy Grandparent's Birthday Surprise Exposes Massive Family Fraud. My parents' friends abandoned them in droves. Dad's accounting firm fired him immediately to distance themselves from the scandal. Mom's book club membership was actually revoked, which, honestly, under normal circumstances would have been hilarious, but I was just too emotionally drained to even crack a smile. The evidence against them was absolutely overwhelming. Security footage from banks showing Mom making the transfers. Forged documents, with handwriting analysis proving Dad had faked my signatures. Tax returns showing unexplained income that perfectly matched the trust fund withdrawals. Character witnesses testifying to my financial struggles while my parents lived lavishly. Of course, my parents' defense attorney tried to paint me as some vindictive daughter, turning on her family just for money. They brought up petty arguments we'd had when I was a teenager, minor rebellions that every kid goes through. They claimed I was greedy and entitled, that I should be grateful for the childhood they supposedly provided. But the prosecution countered hard. They brought out my employment records. I'd been working since I was 14 years old, including a brutal stint at a fast food restaurant where I actually burned my hand on a fryer because we couldn't afford proper medical insurance. My medical records showed I'd skipped necessary dental work because I couldn't even afford the copay. My credit report revealed I'd been forced to take out predatory payday loans just to make rent. Meanwhile, my parents were off vacationing in Europe. They bought artwork worth tens of thousands of dollars. Mom had a collection of designer handbags that could have paid off my student loans 3 times over. It was infuriating. The jury deliberated for a mere 4 hours. The verdict? Guilty on all counts. Fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, forgery. The judge sentenced them each to 10 years in prison and ordered full restitution plus damages. With interest and penalties, they now owed me over $8 million. During the sentencing hearing, the judge addressed my parents directly. Her voice was measured, yet absolutely severe, as she looked down from the bench. You had every advantage in life, she stated. Financial stability, education, opportunities. Yet, you chose to systematically rob your own daughter of her future. This court has seen many cases of theft and fraud, but rarely have I witnessed such calculated, long-term exploitation of one's own child. Mom immediately started sobbing loudly, her shoulders shaking in an exaggerated way. The whole performance felt utterly hollow to me after months of watching her manipulate everyone. Dad, on the other hand, just stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight, refusing to show any emotion whatsoever. Your daughter worked herself to exhaustion, the judge continued, flipping through the documents before her, her voice ringing with indignation. She suffered injuries at work because she couldn't afford proper health care. She went without necessities while you vacationed in Europe. She ate ramen for dinner while you dined at restaurants that charged more for a single meal than she earned in a week. The courtroom was absolutely silent, save for Mom's theatrical weeping. I sat in the front row, squeezed between Grandpa Edmund and Tyler, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I'd imagined this moment would feel triumphant, victorious. But instead, I just felt hollow and utterly tired. The pre-sentence report indicates you've shown no genuine remorse, the judge stated plainly. Your apologies ring hollow when they're always followed by justifications and excuses. You seem to believe you were entitled to this money, that raising your daughter somehow gave you the right to steal her inheritance. Dad finally spoke up, his voice cracking with feigned indignance. Your Honor, with all due respect, we made mistakes, but we're not criminals. We're a family going through a difficult time. The judge cut him off, her voice firm. Mr. Last name, you forged legal documents. You committed identity theft against a minor. You systematically embezzled millions of dollars over a decade. These are not mistakes. These are crimes, deliberate and sustained. Her tone left absolutely no room for argument. 8 years in federal prison for each of you. Bailiff, please remove the defendants. Watching my parents being led away in handcuffs, it should have felt like closure. It really should have. Instead, it felt like watching strangers. The people who raised me, who tucked me in at night and taught me to ride a bike, they had never really existed. They were just actors, playing a role, waiting for the day they could cash in on their investment. There was nothing left of them for me. Nothing. The Malibu house? Seized. The Tesla? Auctioned off. Their bank accounts were frozen and liquidated. Even Mom's precious designer handbags went under the hammer. Every single asset they had was stripped away to repay their massive debt to me. Tyler moved in with Grandpa Edmund. He changed his major to social work and started volunteering with youth advocacy organizations. He told me he wanted to dedicate his life to helping kids whose parents exploited them. We have lunch every Sunday now, and honestly, our relationship is stronger than it ever was. The asset seizure process took months, and it was surreal. I had to watch strangers walk through that Malibu house, a place I'd visited countless times, appraising the furniture, the artwork. The real estate agent leading tours would describe it as a stunning beachfront property with ocean views, never once mentioning it had been purchased with stolen money. I even attended the Tesla auction, out of some morbid curiosity. Dad had absolutely loved that car, constantly posting photos on social media, bragging about its features to anyone who would listen. Watching it sell to some tech entrepreneur from San Francisco for $68,000 felt incredibly surreal. The new owner had no idea of its dark history, no clue that every mile Dad drove had been funded by fraud. But Mom's handbag collection? That was the strangest auction of all. Fashion bloggers and resellers crowded into the auction house, bidding on Birkins and Chanels like they were holy relics. One crocodile skin Hermes bag went for $42,000. I'd watched Mom carry that very bag to my community college graduation, the only education I could afford, while she complained about the uncomfortable folding chairs and the lackluster ceremony. The irony was a punch to the gut. Does it bother you? Tyler asked me as we left the handbag auction, seeing everything sold off like that. It bothers me that it existed in the first place, I answered honestly. Every single item represents something I couldn't have. Medical care, education, security. A bag that costs more than a year's rent shouldn't even exist in the same universe as a daughter eating ramen because she can't afford groceries. Tyler nodded slowly, clearly processing this. I keep thinking about all the times Mom would complain about money, he said. She'd go on these rants about how expensive everything was, how we had to be careful with spending. Meanwhile, she had a closet full of bags worth more than most people's cars. It was part of the manipulation, I told him flatly. Make you feel guilty for asking for things while she hoarded wealth. Classic abuser playbook. Then, during the discovery phase of the trial, about 8 months in, something else truly chilling came to light. Insurance fraud. Investigators found that Mom had taken out a life insurance policy in my name when I was just 19, listing herself as the beneficiary. And she paid the premiums with money from my trust fund. If anything had happened to me, she would have collected another $500,000. That discovery hit differently than all the rest. The trust fund theft was about greed, about entitlement. But a life insurance policy? That suggested something far darker. It suggested that my value to them was potentially worth more dead than alive. My therapist, Dr. Chin, spent several sessions helping me work through the terrifying implications without spiraling into full-blown paranoia. "It doesn't mean they were planning to harm you," she cautioned, "but it does reveal the depth of their objectification. They saw you as an asset to be maximized, not a person to be loved." Additional charges were, of course, filed. Mom's lawyer tried to argue it was a standard financial planning decision, that many parents take out policies on their children. But the prosecutor quickly countered. Standard policies don't use the child's stolen money to pay the premiums, and they certainly don't have payouts that high. Even Aunt Patricia, who'd awkwardly run out of my birthday party, eventually apologized and became an unexpected ally. She admitted she'd always thought my parents' lifestyle seemed suspicious, given Dad's known business struggles, but she just hadn't wanted to believe her own brother could be a thief. But the hardest part, the absolute hardest part of it all, was the grief. I mourned the parents I thought I had, the childhood I believed was real. Every single memory was tainted now. Every birthday gift. Was that bought with my own money? Every family vacation. Funded by fraud? Christmas mornings felt like crime scenes when I looked back on them. It was devastating. So I started therapy. Dr. Chen's office became my sanctuary, a safe space where I could finally unpack 25 years of manipulation and lies. She helped me truly understand that financial abuse is still abuse. That what my parents did wasn't just illegal, it was a profound, soul-crushing betrayal of the parent-child relationship. "They were supposed to protect you," she said during one session. "Instead, they exploited you before you were even old enough to understand money." Grandpa Edmund, bless his heart, seemed to age 10 years during that trial. The betrayal hit him hard, his own son stealing from his granddaughter. But he channeled his pain into action. He established a foundation to help young adults who'd been victims of financial exploitation by family members. He used his wealth and connections to push for stronger legal protections. "You're not just my granddaughter anymore," he told me one afternoon as we reviewed foundation applications. "You're my hero. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to just let them get away with it." I remember telling him I didn't feel heroic. I felt like I was destroying my family. "They destroyed themselves," he corrected gently. "You just refused to be complicit in your own exploitation." Eventually, the money was restored to me, minus some legal fees and the portions that just couldn't be recovered. I ended up with approximately $6 million. I bought a modest house, paid off all my debts, and invested the rest conservatively. I even went back to school, earning my bachelor's degree in forensic accounting. Then I worked for a major firm for 3 years to gain crucial experience. The irony, believe me, was not lost on anyone. My parents did send letters from prison. Dads were full of self-pity and thinly veiled requests for commissary money. Moms were classic manipulation, alternating between guilt trips and love bombing. I read the first few, then I just stopped. Dr. Chin helped me understand I didn't owe them anything, not even my attention. Tyler, on the other hand, struggled with his own guilt. I benefited from stolen money. He confessed to me over lunch one Sunday. "I drove a car bought with your trust fund. I ate meals paid for with your future." "You were a kid," I reminded him gently. "You didn't know. And you're making it right by being honest and rebuilding your life with integrity." 5 years after that catastrophic birthday party, after earning my certified fraud examiner credential and building a solid reputation in the field, I received an invitation. It was to speak at a national conference about financial abuse. Standing at the podium, looking out at a sea of faces, lawyers, social workers, victims like me, it felt surreal. The National Coalition Against Family Financial Exploitation wanted me as their keynote speaker for their annual summit in Chicago. Me, the girl who, just a few years earlier, had been scraping together coins for laundry, was now addressing hundreds of professionals about systemic abuse within families. It was wild. I'd spent weeks preparing that speech, writing and rewriting until the words finally felt authentic. Dr. Chun had helped me strike this delicate balance between vulnerability and strength, between my personal narrative and the broader advocacy. The night before, I barely slept, running through the presentation in my head, terrified I'd break down, crying in front of everyone. But standing at that podium, looking out at the crowd, something just shifted inside me. These people weren't there to judge me or pity me. They were there to learn, to understand, to fight the very same battles I'd been fighting. People think financial abuse only happens in romantic relationships. I began, my voice clear and strong. They don't realize it's rampant in families. Parents who steal their children's identities to open credit cards. Grandparents who drain joint accounts. Siblings who forge wills. And children whose trust funds disappear before they even know they exist. It was powerful. After my speech, dozens of people approached me, sharing their own heartbreaking stories. A woman whose mother stole her entire inheritance to fund a gambling addiction. A man whose father had been systematically draining his disability payments for years. A college student who discovered her parents had taken out massive student loans in her name and simply pocketed the money. It was overwhelming but also incredibly validating. I started a support group. We met every other Tuesday at a local community center, sharing our stories and resources. Some members were completely estranged from their families. Others were in various stages of brutal legal battles. All of us, together, were learning to rebuild our lives and our shattered sense of trust. My career in forensic accounting really took off. I specialized exclusively in family fraud cases, using my personal, gut-wrenching experience to identify red flags and meticulously trace stolen funds. After several years of working for others and building my credentials, I finally started consulting independently. I worked hand in hand with prosecutors to build airtight cases. I testified as an expert witness. Every single case I won felt like another small, profound victory against the overwhelming betrayal I'd endured. One case in particular stayed with me, it really did. A 17-year-old named Emma, a child actress, had earned substantial income from commercials and small television roles. Her mother had managed her finances, claiming everything was being saved for Emma's future. But when Emma turned 18 and requested access to her earnings, her mother suddenly claimed the money had been spent on business expenses and management fees. Emma's case mirrored mine in so many painful ways. The betrayal of a parent, the relentless gaslighting, the years of stolen opportunities. It was eerily familiar. But unlike me, Emma had discovered the theft before she'd spent years struggling in poverty. She had a chance to recover, to redirect her life before too much was irrevocably lost. By the time Emma's case came to me, I was financially stable enough to take it pro bono, spending countless hours meticulously tracing transactions and documenting the fraud. Emma's mother, I discovered, had been even more sophisticated than mine. She'd created fake invoices and fabricated business expenses, meticulously building a paper trail that, on the surface, looked completely legitimate. But my forensic analysis quickly revealed the chilling truth. Nail salon visits categorized as makeup consultation fees. Personal vacations labeled as location scouting trips. Designer clothes, brazenly called wardrobe requirements. The deeper I dug, the more enraged I became. Emma's mother had stolen over $800,000 across 6 years. She'd spent it on boyfriends, gambling, and maintaining a lavish lifestyle she hadn't earned. Meanwhile, Emma was being told she needed to keep working, keep auditioning, keep earning because they were saving for her college fund. It was despicable. How did you know? Emma asked me during a break in her deposition. She looked utterly exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of coffee. How did you know to keep fighting? Because the alternative was letting them win, I said, simply and firmly. Letting them steal not just my money, but my very sense of justice, My fundamental belief that actions have consequences. I couldn't live with that. Emma won her case. Her mother was sentenced to 5 years and ordered to repay every single stolen dollar. Emma used the recovered funds to go to college, study business management, and eventually became an advocate for young performers herself. She later told me that my testimony had been the real turning point in her case, that having someone who understood the specific, agonizing pain of parental betrayal made the judge see it as so much more than just a financial crime. Each case I worked brought new horrors, but also new opportunities for justice. A grandmother who'd stolen her grandson's disability benefits to fund her shopping addiction. A father who'd taken out credit cards in his daughter's name and maxed them out, utterly destroying her credit before she'd even turned 18. A stepmother who'd forged documents to redirect inheritance away from her stepchildren. The more cases I encountered, the more I realized just how incredibly common this abuse was and, heartbreakingly, how rarely it was prosecuted. Families would pressure victims to keep it quiet, to not tear the family apart. Churches and community leaders would preach forgiveness and reconciliation. Law enforcement often dismissed it as a civil matter, refusing to investigate even when clear, undeniable crimes had been committed. So I became relentless. When police wouldn't investigate, I'd compile the evidence myself, building an ironclad case and presenting it directly to prosecutors. When families pressured victims to drop charges, I'd connect them with therapists who truly understood financial abuse. When judges seemed inclined to go easy on family members, I'd provide searing impact statements that illustrated the real, devastating damage done. Grandpa Edmund lived to see my 30th birthday. We celebrated it at his beautiful estate in Connecticut. Just the three of us, me, him, and Tyler. There was cake, champagne, plenty of laughter, and his famously terrible jokes. Thankfully, no surprise trust fund revelations this time. "I'm proud of you," Grandpa Edmund said, his hand trembling slightly as he raised his glass. "Not for the money or the career. For your strength, for refusing to let bitterness consume you." "I learned from the best," I replied, clinking my glass gently against his. He passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months later. His will left everything in a meticulously managed trust with multiple oversight mechanisms specifically designed to prevent fraud. Even in death, he was still protecting his family from themselves. I still think about my 25th birthday sometimes. How one single question shattered my entire reality. How the people I trusted most in the world had been stealing from me my whole life. How I almost lost myself completely in the sheer rage and overwhelming betrayal. But then I also think about what came after. The justice. The slow, painful healing. The profound purpose I found in helping others navigate similar nightmares. The relationship I rebuilt with Tyler, stronger and more honest than it ever was before. The career that now gives me such deep satisfaction and meaning. My parents were released from prison last year after serving 8.5 years with good behavior. Mom sent a card to my office, not my home address. She didn't have that information. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried among case files and legal correspondence. I recognized Mom's elegant handwriting immediately. It was the same script she'd used to forge my signatures on countless documents. My hands actually shook as I opened it. Inside was a generic watercolor card, flowers from some drugstore. The message was brief. "Madison, I've had a lot of time to think about my mistakes. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I'd like the chance to start fresh and rebuild our relationship. You'll always be my daughter. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times, searching desperately for any hint of real accountability. That one word, mistakes, just screamed at me. Not crimes, not theft, not fraud, mistakes. As if she'd accidentally filed the wrong paperwork instead of systematically robbing me blind for years. There was a return address in Nevada, a cheap apartment complex near Las Vegas. I looked it up online and found a truly depressing building, peeling paint, bars on the windows. The reviews mentioned cockroaches and a landlord who rarely fixed anything. The contrast between that and their old life in California couldn't have been more stark. Part of me, a small, dark part, wanted to feel satisfaction at their downfall. But instead, I just felt tired. Dr. Chen had warned me this might happen, that I'd build up their eventual release and potential contact in my mind as this huge, dramatic confrontation, and the reality would be anticlimactic and confusing. "What do you want to do with the card?" she asked during our next session. "Nothing," I said, after a long, heavy pause. Responding at all, even to say no, gives them something. Silence is the answer. But that card haunted me for weeks. I'd catch myself drafting responses in my mind, angry screeds detailing every single thing they'd stolen, or cold, clinical assessments of why reconciliation was utterly impossible, or even just furious questions about why they thought a card would fix years of systematic abuse. Tyler, though, saw them more regularly. He committed to monthly visits at the halfway house where they'd initially been placed, and then continued with occasional dinners after they found jobs and housing. He'd come back from these visits looking utterly drained, reporting that they asked about me every single time. "What do they say?" I finally asked him one Sunday over lunch. Tyler sighed heavily, pushing pasta around his plate. "Mom mostly cries and talks about how she's changed." Dad gets defensive. He alternates between saying he's sorry and then explaining all the reasons why they had to do what they did. It's exhausting. "Do they ask about the money?" The question came out sharper than I intended, a little desperate. "No, actually, they don't dare. They know that conversation leads nowhere good." Tyler met my eyes, a sad look there. "They ask about your job, your health, if you're happy. Mom wanted to know if you're dating anyone. Dad asked if you still like mystery novels." The specificity of that last detail hit me unexpectedly hard. Dad used to take me to the bookstore every month, letting me pick out whatever I wanted. He'd introduced me to Agatha Christie and Patricia Highsmith, sitting with me while I read, discussing plots and suspects. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life now. I didn't respond. Dr. Chen and I had worked through this possibility years ago. Forgiveness didn't require reconciliation. I could release my anger without ever welcoming them back into my life. Some bridges, once burned, should absolutely stay ashes. Tyler still sees them occasionally. He reports back that they're working. Low-wage jobs, living in a small, run-down apartment, struggling with the stark reality that their choices have permanent consequences. They still ask about me every single time. He just tells them she's doing well and quickly changes the subject.
And he's right.
I am doing well. Better than well, in fact. I have a career I love, genuine financial security, and relationships built on honesty rather than deception. I have a life my parents tried to steal from me, and I took it back, piece by piece, day by day. On my 30th birthday, I made a significant donation to Grandpa Edmund's foundation in his memory, $500,000 to help other young people fight back against family financial abuse. It felt profoundly right, using the money my parents tried to steal to prevent others from suffering the same devastating fate. That evening, I stood on my balcony, a glass of wine in hand, watching the sun set over the city. My phone buzzed with genuine birthday messages from friends and colleagues. Tyler sent a photo of himself at a charity event, holding a sign that simply read, "Family means honesty." I thought about the girl I was at 25, standing in her childhood dining room, learning that everything she believed was a lie. She was terrified, yes, and utterly heartbroken. But she was also brave enough to demand the truth, even when it completely destroyed her world. "Happy birthday, Madison," I whispered to that girl, to myself.
You survived.
You thrived. You won. The champagne tasted sweet this time, untainted by betrayal or false celebrations. I bought this bottle with my own money, earned through my own work, in a life I built on my own terms. The trust fund had been restored, yes, but more importantly, I'd restored my trust in myself. My parents taught me a valuable lesson, though certainly not the one they intended. They taught me that family is a choice, not an obligation. That blood relation doesn't excuse betrayal. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who see you as a resource to exploit rather than a person to cherish. I chose Tyler. I chose Grandpa Edmund's memory. I chose the found family of fellow survivors who truly understood my pain. I chose myself, my dignity, my future. Standing on that balcony, finally financially secure and deeply emotionally healing, I realized something truly profound. My parents had stolen $3 million from me, but they'd lost so much more. They'd lost their daughter, their integrity, their freedom, and any chance of a relationship with their grandchildren someday. Meanwhile, I'd gained everything that truly mattered. The knowledge that I was strong enough to fight back, smart enough to rebuild, and brave enough to demand what I deserved. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in incredible shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow, I had a meeting with a new client whose uncle had stolen her entire inheritance. Next week, I was testifying in a deeply disturbing case involving parental identity theft. Next month, I was speaking at a university about recognizing and reporting family fraud. My life now had a profound purpose and meaning, built directly on the ashes of that catastrophic birthday revelation. I transformed my pain into power, my betrayal into advocacy, my stolen money into a weapon against family financial abuse. I raised my glass to the darkening sky, to Grandpa Edmund's memory, to the girl I was, and the woman I'd become. To 25, I said quietly to myself, the birthday that destroyed everything and gave me the chance to build something truly real. The city lights began to twinkle below me, a million tiny stars, each one representing a life, a story, a struggle. Somewhere out there, I knew someone was experiencing their own devastating moment of betrayal, learning just like I did that family isn't always safe. I hoped, with all my heart, that they'd find their way to justice like I did. I would do everything in my power to help them. The champagne bottle was empty. My birthday was officially over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, new opportunities to fight back against the kind of betrayal that once devastated me. I stepped back inside my home, bought with money I earned, decorated with items I chose, filled with the hard-won peace I'd fought for. The door closed behind me with a solid, satisfying click.
Locked.
Safe.
Mine.
My parents had tried to steal my future, but they failed. I'd taken it back, dollar by dollar, choice by choice, day by day. The trust fund was real, restored, and properly mine. But the real fortune, the true treasure, was the strength I discovered in myself when everything fell apart. That was worth more than $3.4 million. That was priceless. So, I've shared my story, my whole journey, and it makes me wonder, have any of you ever faced a betrayal like this, especially from someone you were supposed to trust unconditionally? I really want to hear your thoughts, your experiences. Let me know in the comments below.